Namaskar. A warm welcome to World News and Indian Perspective on All India Radio. This is Prashant Kumar Sinha and with me is Renuka bringing glimpses of the major developments of the day from across the globe. Over the next half an hour, we shall bring you the latest from the world of politics, economy, sports, entertainment and more. The headlines. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi asserts all arms of the government working unitedly to deal with COVID-19 situation in the country. First emergency COVID-19 relief shipment from the United States arrives in New Delhi. India's aviation regulator DGCA extends suspension of international commercial passenger flight services till 31st of May this year. In Israel, 44 people killed in a stampede that occurred at a religious gathering at Mount Meron. And in IPL cricket, Punjab Kings set a target of 180 runs for Royal Challengers Bangalore in Ahmedabad. As the number of COVID-19 cases is on the rise, we appeal to our listeners to take all precautions and all those above 18 years of age to get vaccinated without any hesitation. The vaccination for the person of ages between 18 and 44 would begin from the 1st of May at designated facilities. Stay safe and protected by following these three simple steps. Wear a face mask, maintain 2 gaz ki duri for social distancing, and focus on hand and face hygiene. Now the news in detail. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has asserted that all arms of the government are working unitedly and rapidly to deal with the COVID-19 situation in the country and urged union ministers to stay in touch with people of their respective regions to help them and keep getting their feedback. He stressed the need to ensure that issues at the local level are promptly identified and addressed. Mr. Modi stated this on Friday during the Council of Ministers meeting held virtually to discuss the situation arising out of the second wave of COVID in the country. The Council of Ministers noted that the present pandemic crisis is a once-in-a-century crisis and has thrown a big challenge for the world. During the meeting, the Government of India's Team India approach to fight COVID based on the collective efforts of the centre, state governments and the people of India was highlighted. The Council also reviewed all efforts made in the past 14 months by the central and state governments and the people. It was also briefed about the efforts by the central government in coordination with the states towards building up infrastructure in the form of ramping up hospital beds, PSA oxygen facilities, resolving issues in production, storage and transport of oxygen, and tackling matters related to the availability of essential medicines. The support measures to the vulnerable population in the form of provision of food grains and financial support to Jan Dhan account holders were also pointed out. In the meeting, it was also noted that India could successfully produce 2 vaccines and there are many candidates at various stages of approval and induction. More than 15 crore vaccinations have been done as on date. The first of several emergency COVID-19 relief shipments from the United States arrived on Friday morning in New Delhi. More such flights are expected in the next week. The US is providing oxygen support, oxygen concentrators, oxygen generation units, PPEs, vaccine manufacturing supplies, rapid diagnostic tests, therapeutics and public health assistance. Another consignment from the United States carrying vital medical supplies reached India this evening. The Ministry of External Affairs informed that the second military aircraft loaded with medical supplies has arrived, bringing more oxygen cylinders and 7 lakh rapid testing kits. India has thanked the United States for this timely and quick mobilization of medical support.
External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar today spoke to U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and discussed the Indian requirements to address the COVID challenge more effectively. They reviewed the flow of equipment and materials coming from the U.S. In a tweet, Dr. Jaishankar said they highlighted the importance of strengthening oxygen supply, expanding vaccine production, and increasing remdesivir supply. He also appreciated the forthcoming response of the U.S. in this regard. India's vaccination drive against COVID-19 continues with added momentum and has crossed the cumulative tally of over 15 crore 22 lakh doses so far. In the world's largest vaccination program, the nation administered more than 22 lakh 24,000 doses of COVID vaccine in the last 24 hours. The Health Ministry has informed that in a span of 104 days since the beginning of the vaccination drive, the country has so far successfully given the first dose of vaccine to more than 12 crore 54 lakh people. On the other hand, more than 2 crore 67 lakh people have been fully vaccinated with both the required doses. Starting from Saturday, which is also the third phase of India's vaccination drive, everyone above the age of 18 years will be eligible to take COVID vaccines. Aviation regulator DGCA on Friday extended the suspension of international commercial passenger flight services till the 31st of May this year. Scheduled international flight operations were suspended from 23rd of March last year in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic in the country. However, DGCA said that international scheduled flights will be allowed on select routes by the competent authority on a case-to-case basis. The restriction will not be applicable to cargo flights and flights specifically approved by the aviation regulator.
In today's hotspot section, we bring you a discussion on international support for India in the fight against COVID-19. In conversation are former diplomat Ashok Sajjanar and journalist Simran Sodhi.
Today we are discussing the international cooperation which India has received in the wake of the second coronavirus pandemic which has swept India. The Foreign Secretary, Mr. Harsh Shringla, also briefed the media yesterday, and he pointed out that over 40 countries have reached out to India to help India meet its many emergency requirements. Ambassador Sajjanar, when we see this international pouring and we see this cooperation happening globally, how do you assess the situation, and also is this then a reflection of the goodwill that India has built for itself globally?
Yes, you're right, Simran, because when Foreign Secretary Harshvardhan Shringla, he says that it's 40 countries that have voluntarily and spontaneously come out to support and help India in this time of an unprecedented crisis and catastrophe. That definitely signifies outpouring of goodwill, because it is not only countries that have strategic partnership with India, not only United States, Russia, Singapore, Australia, Japan, and all the others. But there are countries which are maybe not so developed countries, not so rich, not so powerful, not so prosperous, but all of them have come out and they have offered their help. So across the board, the countries have come and are willingly and voluntarily offering supplies to India. As you said, it is a measure of the goodwill. Many of the countries have said that they are coming forward because when they were in need, when they wanted help and support and assistance, India was for them. So today, they also want to come in and support India when it is in such a difficult situation. President Joe Biden, when he was addressing the press, he said in the initial period of the pandemic, India came to our assistance, and now we are here for India.
Mr. Sajjanar, building on what we have seen is the reaction from the United States, and we saw that the first contingent arrived today, the US aid arrived today, and this has also followed President Joe Biden's telephonic conversation with Prime Minister Narendra Modi on April 26th, and the US assistance is likely to include emergency medical care units, oxygen-related supplies, vaccine-related supplies, and other therapeutics as needed. There has been a slight criticism that the US response was maybe a little hesitant. Would you give that analysis much thought, or would you say that things have actually flown pretty smoothly and the US has stood by India as a partner?
I think I would agree with a little with the assessment that was made, that maybe there was a small blip, there was a small stumble. What India would have expected that the United States would have come more readily and more actively to the support of India, both in terms of the equipment, the supplies, but also in terms of words of sympathy and support. So at the initial stages, this was not forthcoming. In fact, just about 10 days ago, on the 16th of April, there was an SOS that had been sent by the chairman of the Serum Institute of India, Azhar Poonawala, and that was addressed to the President of the United States, wherein he had said that we are in urgent needs of some raw materials and inputs for manufacture of both the Covishield, which is the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine, and also Covovax, which Serum Institute would be manufacturing for Novavax, which has been manufactured, which has been created in the United States. So they need some raw materials, and those raw materials had not been forthcoming from the United States. So there was a little bit of a delay, but I don't think that it was an intentional delay. And once the United States realized it, they pulled out all the stops. there was no holds barred, and we had words of support coming in, starting right from President Joe Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Jake Sullivan, he spoke to his counterpart, Mr. Ajit Doval, and the Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. All of them came out very, very strongly and said that we are going to assist and help and support India in every possible way. And that led also to the telephonic conversation between President Biden and Prime Minister Modi, where it was mentioned that all support that is possible, then that the United States will be extending to India. And as you said, Simran, it includes oxygen generators, because oxygen is one item that has been in very short supply in India. So whether it is oxygen generators, oxygen concentrators, liquid oxygen, the oxygen cylinders, so all these will be coming. There are 2 plane loads that have already landed. A third plane load is coming. There is about 100 million worth of medical equipment are being sent by the United States. In addition to that, what the United States has also mentioned is that it has supplies of about 60 to 65 million AstraZeneca vaccines, which it is not going to use because it is in its own vaccination drive, it is using the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines. So these are vaccines that the United States will be supplying to other countries. It will be to Mexico, to Brazil, to Canada, and to India. So India will also be able to get a significant chunk of these vaccines which are lying in the inventory in the United States. In addition to that, India would also be able to get the raw materials and inputs that Serum Institute of India had been asking for. In fact, those items had been put under some sort of a restriction, if not exactly a ban, by America under the Defense Production Act. The president had invoked the DPA, which is a wartime legislation which was enacted in the early 1950s during the Korean War, and which said that some of these items which are used by the American industry, by the US industry for its own use and production for the people of America, they would have the first right. So the requirement and the demands by the Serum Institute, they were not being fulfilled. So the decision has been taken by President Biden that these raw materials and inputs would also be provided so that the production of both AstraZeneca vaccine as well as Covovax, which India would be using in due course, that they could be ramped up and they could meet the requirements, again, not only of people in India, but people all over the world. You would recall that India started its own vaccination drive on the 16th of January, but then it started providing vaccines to the whole world, and it has provided supply to more than 80 countries, more than 60 million vaccines. So India's vaccination drive under the Maitri Vaccine Initiative is not only for use by Indian citizens, but as the Prime Minister mentioned some time ago, it is being used for the whole humanity and for whole mankind.
Pastor Sajanar, as you mentioned about vaccine Maitri, and we saw how India had reached out globally, whether it was sending the vaccine, and at a point when the world faced a shortage of hydroxychloroquine, that time also India had reached out, and we see that the world is reciprocating today. We see that France is sending India help, as is Germany, the United Kingdom. So we see a lot of help from Europe also, and the fact that Europe itself is also struggling quite, it's a difficult phase for them. Their corona cases are also on the rise. So in the middle of all this, as we see Europe itself struggling with the crisis, it is also taking this effort out to help India. How do you think this reflects on India's stature globally and the ties that India has built with various nations that in times of crisis, when we see UK, Germany, France dealing with their own crisis, Japan is going through hard time with the corona crisis, but despite their own domestic problems, they are standing with India, they are sending supplies to India, and it seems like international cooperation is the real fundamental going behind all this today.
This signals, and this is a testimony to the high respect and prestige that India has garnered over the years. This is a testimony to the goodwill that India has over the last, of course, many years, but particularly over the last 7 years, because we have seen the very proactive and the bold and the energetic foreign policy that Prime Minister Modi has pursued over these years in terms of cementing ties, in terms of cementing relations. That is why, as you mentioned very correctly, Simran, that there are these countries, whether it is France, Germany, UK, it is Sweden, it is Japan, all of them are having their own lockdowns. All of them are having challenges to meet as far as the COVID-19 pandemic is concerned. But that notwithstanding, they are making sure that they supply to India, they send supplies to India. What is very urgently required here to deal with our once-in-a-century crisis, totally unanticipated, totally unexpected. And that is why what is of greatest urgency in India, all of them are flowing to India. And I think it's a matter of great satisfaction that all these countries, to the extent possible, they are doing, and it is reflective of the goodwill that India has been able to garner and the very strong ties of friendship, cooperation and participation that India has got.
Mr. Sajjanar, we also saw that in the Quad meetings, that is the meeting between the US, India, Japan, Australia, the discussions for ramping up production in India for the corona vaccine were discussed, and it was decided that, India would step up its production capacities. How do you assess the success or the role that Quad has played as India counters the wave home? And going forward, how much can one expect from the Quad countries coming together in times of crisis like what we are facing today?
I think this is really a testing time as far as the Quad is concerned. Of course, in this context, the Quad is not acting and working together as one unit. That will happen, I think, going forward. Here, the Quad individual countries, like we've spoken about, how the United States is supplying about more than $100 million worth of goods and equipment to India. Japan is making its own contribution. Australia has also sent the first tranche of its support. So they are acting individually. But you are right when you say that on the 12th of March, when the Quad Summit meeting took place, then it was decided that technology would be provided by the United States and Japan. Also, funding would be provided by both these countries to India to ramp up its production so that we would be able to produce 1 billion doses of the vaccine by 2022. And this would be provided to countries in the Indo-Pacific, particularly as far as the ASEAN countries are concerned. So I think going forward, this has huge potential. I think this collaboration between the 4 Quad countries is going to be very seminal.
Ambassador Sajjanar, another country that has really stepped up has been Russia. And we've already seen that 2 Russian flights with oxygen concentrators, lung ventilation equipment has arrived. And the Russian ambassador to India also tweeted that the Russian Federation decided to send humanitarian assistance to India in the spirit of the special and privileged strategic partnership between our 2 countries, as well as in the context of our anti-COVID-19 cooperation. How much does this strengthen the very age-old relationship between India and Russia?
So this is again testimony to the time-tested partnership. It is Russia is a key pillar of India's foreign policy, and this has been demonstrated once again. In fact, Russia was the first country to offer its assistance and support. And notwithstanding the changes that are taking place on the global geopolitical scene, Russia has come forward to support India. And this was again reflected by the very warm, cordial and useful conversation that Prime Minister Modi had with President Putin just day before yesterday. First of all, to thank him for all the support that Russia is extending. And also, it was decided at that time that the relationship would be elevated to the 2+2 level, which means that the foreign minister and the defense minister of both countries would be meeting each other. So this reflects that Russia is the only non-Quad country to have such a 2+2 partnership with India. This signifies that Russia is a very significant player as far as India's foreign policy is concerned.
And in the coming days, we will continue to follow the developments in international cooperation as countries stand together to fight this pandemic. With these thoughts, we bring today's discussion to an end. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chinese Foreign Minister and State Councillor Wang Yi has sent his condolence message to External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar about the COVID situation in the country. In response to a question at the regular press briefing on Friday, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson said, according to informal statistics, 26,000 ventilators and oxygen concentrators, 15,000 patient monitors and 3,800 tons of medicines have been sent so far. Chinese companies are working round the clock for production. In the coming days, more supplies will be delivered. He said cargo flights to India are in smooth operation.
The political turmoil in Myanmar combined with the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic could result in almost half of the nearly 50 million population in the country living into poverty by early next year. According to a report of the UN Development Programme, UNDP, the ongoing political crisis will compound the socio-economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Consequently, close to 48.2% of the Myanmar population will live in poverty by 2022 compared to 24.8% in 2017. Noting the significant improvement over 12 years between 2005 to 17, the report mentions that Myanmar was able to nearly halve the number of people living in poverty during this period. However, the challenges of the last 12 months have put all these gains at risk. The report said that in the absence of functioning democratic institutions, Myanmar faces a tragic and avoidable backslide towards level of poverty not seen in a generation. The urban poverty is also expected to triple as the worsening security situation continues to affect supply chains and hinder movement of people, services and commodities. According to the study, women and children are the biggest sufferers. Almost half of Myanmar's children are projected to be living in poverty within a year. The World Bank has projected a 10% contraction in the Myanmar economy in 2021 due to a combination of several factors like insufficient stimulus and investment, government relief not matching earning losses, among others. The banking operations are in a standstill situation in the country. Almost 80% of Myanmar's international trade is seaborne. UNDP estimates that the trade volume imports has dropped by between 55 and 64% in the 2 months since military takeover on February the 1st. All these factors point out to the possibility of Myanmar approaching the point of economic collapse, says the UNDP report. This is All India Radio giving you the world news.
3 steps to stay protected and stay safe from COVID-19. Wear face mask, 2 gaz ki duri to maintain social distancing, maintain hand and face hygiene.
In Israel, 44 people were killed in a stampede that occurred at a religious gathering at Mount Meron on Friday. The tragedy struck when a large number of Jewish pilgrims had gathered at the site of the reputed tomb of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, a 2nd century Talmudic sage. Police sources told local media that it started after some attendees slipped on steps, which caused dozens more to fall. Authorities say at least 44 people have been killed and about 150 injured. Police have launched their own investigation. Reportedly, 3 times more participants, including children, had gathered than was authorized by the police, leading to the worst civilian disaster in Israel's modern history. Indian External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar has expressed sadness on the tragedy at Mount Meron in Israel during the celebrations of Lag Bauma. Dr. Jaishankar extended condolences and wished the injured a speedy recovery. Punjab Kings have set a target of 180 runs before Royal Challengers Bangalore RCB at the Narendra Modi Stadium in Ahmedabad. In reply, the RCB were 116 for 7 in 17.5 overs when reports last came in. Put into bat first by RCB captain Virat Kohli, PKS made 179 for 5 in the stipulated 20 overs. For Punjab, skipper KL Rahul thrashed the RCB bowling to score 91 runs in 57 balls, and Chris Gale made 46 in 24 balls.
In the other sports news, Bruno Fernandes and Edinson Cavani scored a brace each as Manchester United came from behind with 5 second-half goals to thrash Roma 6-2 in the first leg of their Europa League semi-final tie. Fernandes opened the scoring for United in the 9th minute, but Lorenzo Pellegrino levelled with a penalty and Edin Dzeko put Roma ahead in the 34th. Cavani stuck in the 48th and 64th minutes to turn matters around, and Fernandes' penalty in the 71st, Paul Pogba in the 75th, and substitute Mason Greenwood in the 86th ensured a big win for United at home. The result leaves the 2017 champions United well placed for next Thursday's second leg in Roma and a place in the May 26th final in Gdansk, Poland. However, the other English side, 2019 runners-up Arsenal, lost 2-1 at Spain's Villarreal in a game both sides ended with 10 men. National champion and Olympic-bound boxer Simranjeet Kaur has been dropped from the Indian squad for the Asian Boxing Championships to be held at Dubai from May 21st as she is still recovering from COVID-19. And now let us take a look at the major developments around the world as reported in the foreign press. Washington Post writes that FBI told Giuliani and key Trump ally in Senate of disinformation campaign. Washington Post writes that 45 killed, dozens injured in a stampede at religious festival in Israel. The Guardian reports that Kyrgyzstan-Tajikistan ceasefire holding after day of intense fighting. Globe and the Mail writes that Pfizer vaccine pilot to roll out at pharmacies in GTA hotspots amid questions over how locations were chosen. Globe and the Mail writes that AstraZeneca says it's on track to deliver 200 million COVID-19 vaccine doses a month. Gulf Time reports that Indonesia landslide kills 3, more missing.
As the domestic stock markets, key indices ended with sharp cuts and the rupee weakened marginally against the US dollar. In international markets, Brent crude prices snapped 3 days of gains to slip towards $68 a barrel. A report from the Business World.
The Sensex at the Bombay Stock Exchange slumped 984 points or 2% to end at 48,782. Nifty at the National Stock Exchange plunged 264 points, 1.8% to 14,631. In the global equity markets, Asia Pacific ended mostly higher. So Japan's Nikkei 225 index, China's Shanghai Composite Index and South Korea's Kospi Index fell 0.8% each. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index had declined 2% and Singapore's Straits Times Index shed 0.1%. In Europe, London's FTSE 100 had inched up 0.3%, then Germany's DAX had moved up 0.5%, but France's CAC 40 had traded marginally higher in intraday trade. Global crude oil futures rose sharply as bullish forecasts on recovering demand this summer outweighed concerns about the impact of rising COVID-19 cases in India, Japan and Brazil. So Brent crude for June jumped $1.08 to trade at $68.35 a barrel, while U.S. crude futures for June climbed 96 cents to $64.82 a barrel. Back home, gold dropped 191 rupees to 46,283 rupees per 10 grams at the Delhi bullion market on the back of decline in global precious metal prices. Silver plunged 1,062 rupees to 67,795 rupees per kilogram.
A quick look at the headlines once again. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi asserts all arms of the government working unitedly to deal with COVID-19 situation in the country. First emergency COVID-19 relief shipment from the US arrives in New Delhi. India's aviation regulator DGCA extends suspension of international commercial passenger flight services till the 31st of May this year. In Israel, 44 people killed in a stampede that occurred at a religious gathering at Mount Meron. And in IPL cricket, Punjab Kings set a target of 180 runs for Royal Challengers Bangalore in Ahmedabad. India is celebrating the 151st birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. Before we end, let's listen to his favorite bhajan, Vaishnavajan, by artists from Mongolia. And with that, we end this bulletin. We'll be back at the same time tomorrow with the next edition of World News.